Hi everyone, it's Gardner. So my last video on here, I talked about a really profound experience I had. It was 3 different times that I cited this happening to me. So I had it more than once, and I was describing it like the most profound, mystical, whatever experience that I think about all the time for what it could be, and I described it on here, and I reached out to this YouTuber Panyo Basa, he's a former Buddhist monk, and he makes YouTube videos that are really good. So yeah, you guys should check out his YouTube channel. He responded. He shared his thoughts on my video. He commented and said what he thinks it was that I could have been experiencing. And yeah, I wanted to talk about that. He shared his insights. So Panyo Basa, if you're watching, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on this matter. Thank you. And yeah, so I wanted to get into that and elaborate a bit too, because when I made my previous video about this, I was just kind of remembering, like, it was just kind of off the top of my head, me describing it, because that's how my YouTube videos usually are. But I thought, okay, I'll make some notes this time so that I can not repeat myself, but so that I'm going into, I guess, some more detail, and yeah, so that I'm not repeating myself, so that it's more, so it's clearer, so it's as clear as I can put it into words, I guess, about this. Yeah, so, first off, yeah, I'll start with what Panyo Basa said. Basically, he had like 2 guesses about when I experienced it the first 2 times. This experience, however you want to describe it, he said that it could be that my mind was like slammed out of samsara, so like slammed out of conventional reality, or he mentioned that like what we experience right now is like conventionally real, or virtually real. And yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Kind of makes me think of like Matrix or Truman Show, like how the point is that it seems real, but it's not fundamentally real. Like that's what he was saying, and that's I think that's a great way of putting that. And he said that it could have been brought about by like an unpleasant experience, and it slammed my normal state of mind outside of samsara, or outside of conventional reality. And then he said that the 3rd experience I mentioned, it could have been from me contemplating this stuff, like the nature of reality, and like that I reached like or temporarily reached this like exalted state of mind. And once again, I'm not claiming to be enlightened, or that I've achieved anything holy or anything like that. I'm not making claims like that. All I'm doing is I'm just saying what my experience was, and I think about it all the time, and I try to make sense of it. And he liked how I said it was irreversible, and yeah, and I even commented, I've replied to his comment that yeah, I can't emphasize that part enough, and that's the truth, that it seemed absolutely like unconditionally irreversible for whatever I was realizing, that I just can't possibly emphasize that part enough. That is totally irreversible. And yeah, so on my notes here, the first thing I have about that is that it made me think like life is like a paradox. Because when this happened to me, it was like I was thinking about how did life, everything come into being? And then it was like something clicked in my brain, like, oh, this never came into being. This doesn't exist. Humans don't exist. No, the material world doesn't really exist. And it made me think, like, when I reflect on this, think back to it, it's like, is part of reaching such a realization recognizing that there's like a paradox in existence, that like it can't exist. Like, let's say you're having a dream and you realize something impossible is going on that couldn't happen in real life, and then you realize, oh, that's because I'm dreaming, and then you wake up. So could that be how life is? That there are things you can notice if you think about it enough, and you realize, wait, this isn't real, and you snap out of it, or snap to some sort of state where you're beginning to realize that. I don't know, but that's one of the things that I have here on my notes that comes to my mind. That's something that occurs to me, that it's like, is part of life figuring out the paradox, that this is a paradox, that it doesn't exist, that it's like an illusion or dream. And let's see. Yes, that reminds me of a lot of different like Buddhist and Hindu type stuff where you you empty your mind, or reflect on or question your identity, or self or lack of self, non-self, stuff like that. And yeah, so it's like realizing that this literally doesn't exist. And I've noticed that seems to make people mad at sometimes if they're like a Westerner or from an Abrahamic background, sometimes, like where it's just such a foreign or alien notion that they're used to thinking that, oh, of course, like they'll think, oh, of course the material world exists, and if you suggest that it doesn't, they might get kind of angry because it's questioning their existence, or the existence of everything, the existence of what they think is true. But I think that that's the reality, that this isn't real, that this is fake. It isn't any different from a dream, or at least not, it's not any more real than a dream. It's still fake. And let's see. Yeah, so the whole idea no one exists, and it makes me think of like how in Buddhism you have the Diamond Sutra, where the Buddha's talking about that there's no such thing as other people, or that no one exists. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't have that memorized verbatim, so hopefully I'm getting that right yet, where the Buddha in the Diamond Sutra says something like that, and how that's difficult for people to grasp. Yeah, it's really deep stuff, but it makes me think of this experience. And another thing, this might be controversial, but another thing when thinking about this, because the experiences that I'm describing, whatever you want to call it, they were unbelievably profound. It was like the craziest thing, or most profound thing. When I say crazy, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. If it was something mystical, I just mean it was heavy. It was like wild or heavy, however you want to put that. And it definitely was. It was like, imagine like a human brain a human's consciousness suddenly in the brain of a dog. It was like too much to handle. Or like a computer, Windows, whatever the latest Windows is, I don't even know for computers. And all of a sudden I'm like a computer from the 90s, like a computer from like 1995 or whatever, suddenly running modern computer software. It was like too much for it to handle. It was like overheating. But that's how my brain, my mind felt for whatever this revelation, for lack of a better term, was. That it was like that. And that's definitely the truth, that it was just heavy, it was wild, it was deep, and for how it felt. And I've seen people make videos online talk about this non-duality stuff, and every now and then I'll hear people say, like people that are claiming to understand enlightenment, and not that I'm putting them down or anything, but I've heard some people say like that, not Panyo Basa, he's not saying what, he's not one of the ones saying these things, but I've seen people talk about non-duality and they'll say, oh, there's no fireworks, there's nothing wild or anything like that, that it's just like you're in your normal state of mind. Well, this wasn't my experience. I'm not claiming enlightenment, but to the people that say things like that nothing, that if you do have some sort of mystical, whatever, enlightening experience, oh, that's nothing profound or crazy or wild or whatever happens. To people making claims like that, I think they might be describing something else. I don't want to put them down, because like if it's somebody that's genuinely enlightened, I don't want to say anything bad about them or say they're wrong, but it's just, it doesn't sound at all like my experience. What I experienced was unbelievably wild. Like I said, like a computer from the 90s trying to run what would be on a supercomputer from the future. Like it was, or a human brain, a human mind in a dog's brain, or an ant's brain, an insect's brain with human consciousness. It's too much for it to handle. It's like overheating. That's what I'm trying to describe. So when I hear people say, oh, it was nothing, like it was just like you're just like everyday life and nothing wild happened, I don't know, because that doesn't sound anything like, and I'm not claiming to be enlightened, but yeah, it doesn't sync up, and I'm reluctant to just say, oh, you're wrong, because I'm not claiming to have all the answers. But what would third people, when they describe it like that, I think I'm inclined to suspect that they were just in a happy mood or something. Because what I'm talking about, it was terrifying, but it would also seem like the truth. Like there was like beauty in it. Like, well, this is absolutely the truth. Like there wasn't any doubt. And I don't have doubt about it now, even though I'm not claiming to be enlightened. I don't know what it was, but what I experienced, it was heavy, wild, however you want to put that. And it just doesn't, I don't see any parallels to when people describe enlightenment or states of realization as like nothing profound or mystical or heavy happening. They make it seem like, oh yeah, just everyday life. It doesn't sound at all like what I'm talking about. So I think that's okay if I say I question when they describe it like that. It runs contrary to my experience. It doesn't sync up. my honest thoughts. I mean, no disrespect to people that if they do describe it like that. But yeah. Anyway, that's my notes here, and then. Oh yeah. I've had people say, "Oh well, F. Gardner, what you're describing is yourself or true self, or I guess like how Hindus would say Brahman," and I guess this is one of the reasons why I'm Buddhist, because what I'm trying to describe, there definitely was no sense of self. Like that was clear. So it's like, if you're gonna call it a self, it's like redefining this. It's like redefining no self as the self. It's not exactly accurate. You could say, oh, well, you're describing the same thing. I don't know. I still lean more toward what the Buddha said. It makes more sense from what I'm trying to describe, because it was like okay, I'm speaking figuratively with what I'm about to say now. You walk in a room and it's empty. There's no one there. So it was like your mind, all of a sudden, nothing's there. Not just the mind, but everything. It was like you look around the room and everything is just like a void, like is absent of a self. Because a self, that means there's something to identify with. But with this, there was not. It was like, yeah, everything seems like it's still there, but it's not. That reality doesn't exist, or that the true reality is non-reality. It's so hard to put this into words. It's like recognizing that what you think is material is just an illusion. Anyway, I'll move on my list. That's probably the best way I could put that. I don't want to repeat myself, because I already talked about that in the previous video. And this is just from my notes for what this was like now. The nothingness or emptiness, no self. The Buddhist stuff, that it just simply syncs up the most with this. That this literally, the material world, it doesn't exist, that it's never existed. And this includes people. So it's like if you see someone, they're just like a hologram or something. They're not really there. They're like a projection from your mind or something. And that your mind is, your own mind, that's part of the illusion or projection too. So it's like you're observing this, but there's no observer. There's no one to observe it. And that's part of the observation, is that it's, I guess, a paradox in a way, is that there's no one observing the observation. There's no observer of the observation, which sounds like a paradox, and maybe that's because that's part of how it works. I don't know. It's so mysterious. No emotions. That too. Like, I said it was terrifying, but that's, I think, because it's part of how it is. It's like it was terrifying, but it seemed like the truth. And there weren't normal emotions. It was like this overpowering feeling. And when I say terrifying, that's like a conventional way of describing it. Overpowering might be more accurate. Just that, like, you ever have an epiphany and it's just like, oh, I realize it now. Like whatever the epiphany is, that, but times like 1 billion. So terrifying in the sense of like an extreme emotion or reaction, but it was like normal emotions, feelings, happiness, sadness, anger, whatever, they're all absent. Because those would be things, I guess, to identify with. And it wasn't any of that. And I guess when I was coming out of it, that's when it seemed terrifying, because this is before I became Buddhist. So those ideas, I guess, scared me at the time, or were unsettling. So it was like everything's like an empty room, no people there, including yourself. You're not even there. But you're aware of this even though you don't exist, and there's no emotions, and it seems unbelievably profound, because it is. And it's like there's terror, for lack of a better term, but beauty simultaneously, because you need to recognize that it's like the truth. And yeah, I wonder at times how many people can appreciate this, grasp the beauty that life doesn't exist. Because like, I look at the world and I see so much evil, and I think about, wait a minute, but if this is all an illusion, then all of a sudden it's like a sigh of relief. Like, oh, thank goodness this doesn't really exist. What a relief. Like with all the evil and craziness in the world and everything. So, I wonder, I don't know, am I the only one that can appreciate this? That's a thought that's occurred to me. And I'm not claiming that that's the case, because I also realize there's no one to appreciate it. But I think that's part of the beauty of it. Because no one exists, including myself. So how could there be anyone to appreciate the beauty in what I'm saying? And I don't know, a lot of people, I guess, maybe that sounds disturbing, like, oh, you're saying nothing exists, isn't that horrifying? But it makes me think part of it is you need to grasp the beauty of that this isn't real, that nothing ever existed, that there's beauty there underneath, and the recognition, or part of the recognition, realization, is accepting that, and that's very difficult to do. That you need to realize the beauty that nothing exists, that there is no life, that you need to accept the beauty of no life. This is so hard for me to put into words, but I'm trying. I've had people ever since I posted this ask me, well, did it seem familiar? Because I mentioned like that it seemed strange. It seemed like both, actually. It seemed like when people talk about having these sorts of experiences, they'll say, oh, it seemed like I was returning home. And it did seem like I was remembering something, like something obvious, like, oh, of course, this is how it is. It's always been like this. But there's always been nothing. And so it's in that sense, it seemed familiar that I was I remembered something, but it did also seem at the same time foreign or alien in this, because it's different from what we understand is reality. So is like returning to something you remember, but what you're remembering is something very different from what you accept as your normal life. That there is no life, that the material world and everything is fake, including people and even yourself. Yes. Let's see. Let me see what's next on my list. Yeah, so it's like that, the realization or remembering that I know this is true, that I've always known this was true, and that I've only ever forgotten that, but forgetting it was part of the illusion. And that I was wrong about what I thought the world was. I was wrong about what I thought life was. That I was wrong about what I thought myself was. There is no life, there is no world, and there is no self. That it's completely and unconditionally empty. But that perhaps the mind doesn't fully understand what that would be like unless you have this realization. And, oh yeah, this is something I hear often about non-duality type people that talk about these experiences. They'll say that they had this realization that there's nothing to do. That part actually makes sense. I wrote that down in my notes. The more I thought about this, that, okay, it's like, I guess it's kind of like the two truths doctrine in Buddhism. That would be my best guess from myself, would be like how it's like how a dream feels true, but it's not fundamentally true or real. I guess kind of like what Panyobasa was telling me, that, okay, so according to Buddhism, the meaning of life is to snap out of this, snap out of samsara, to end suffering and escape the cycle of rebirth and everything. So you're not going to be reborn ever again. So, of course, that's true. So I guess that would be like, if I view that in that context, like two truths, and I guess the other truth in this context would be, well, this isn't really going on though. So even though that's true, this isn't, it's like how a dream isn't really happening. It's like being a dream character and wanting to escape the dream. Well, yeah, you could wake up from the dream, I guess, but it's like, it still wasn't really happening, so there's nothing really to do in the dream world, like your goals or free will or things you could be doing. So it's like, well, there's no one here. I'm not even here. So how could there be anything to do if there's no one to do the doing? So that part makes sense when people say nothing to do, but I guess it would need to be viewed in the context of something like the two truths doctrine for it to fully make sense. I can kind of get it when I think about that it's pointing toward that. And let's see. Yeah, I already mentioned the Diamond Sutra stuff, but yeah, then there's like in Mahayana, the whole Bodhisattva vow, vowing to help other people, and it's like, well, is that the Diamond Sutra? If there's no one else, if there's no one that exists, if there aren't people, then it's like, I think I've heard Panyobasa mention this before, and it makes sense that like you realize that there's no one to help, and you're already a Bodhisattva. I seem to remember him describing that before in one of his videos. I know he's Theravada, but he's I remember hearing him talk about the Diamond Sutra. And yeah, the Diamond Sutra is very profound. No matter what your religious views are, if you're into non-duality or otherwise, it's very profound. And yeah, Panyobasa, yeah, the stuff you were saying, your comments in for my previous video, yeah, that's really profound stuff. And yeah, thanks for your insight, your thoughts on that from your experience. I really appreciate that. Yes, okay, I guess that's pretty much most of my points here. And I don't think I really repeated a lot. I wanted to go over one by one the things that I was trying to describe in further detail about this, that I described in my last video. Yeah, so it's like, to summarize it quickly, if someone asked me, F. Gardner, summarize really quickly all these the experiences you've had as best as you can, regardless of what it meant, something mystical or otherwise. Whether it actually was some sort of enlightening experience, which I'm not claiming. So whether if it was something like that or if it was as simple as a dream, what did it tell you? And I guess I would say that there is no life. Literally. That's not a metaphor. I'm not speaking figuratively. I mean that as literally as I can. I can't emphasize that enough. And also that the irreversibility of this realization, that I know this isn't real. I know this is not going on. I know this is not happening at all, whatsoever. This is a fantasy, delusion, whatever. That life does not exist, period. And that's so hard to wrap the human mind, the human brain around, something like that. Because we're so used to accepting the material world as a fact, but it's not a fact. It's like, it only seems real. I guess like what Panyobasa was saying, conventionally real or virtually real, but not fundamentally real. Yeah, so that, and it's like that you need to accept the beauty that there is no life, to appreciate that, whether you want to say nothingness or emptiness, that it's all a void of some sense. You enter the room, but it's an empty room. There's no one there. And then your own self, you disappear too. There's no one there, and there never was anyone there, or will be anyone there. That life is a fantasy, for lack of a better term. Yeah, I guess that's how I would try to put that into words, to summarize that quickly, or to conclude the video. For me to try to summarize this again. For me, yeah, I'm trying to summarize something incredibly complex that I'm not claiming to have all the answers about, but I knew that this was, yeah, like I said, totally irreversible, that this experience, that this was irreversible in the sense of what I realized, that there's no going back, that I'm not even here right now, that I know that, even though I tried to make sense of this, it was like, I was going to say remembering the ultimate truth, but I'm very reluctant to use words like that because I'm not claiming to be enlightened. But this is what it felt like. I'm not really here. That I realized that I'm not really here. And I know that for a fact. that when I had these realizations, my perspective was irreversibly changed in that regard, that it doesn't matter what people tell me. Like the cloud of unknowing stuff that I was talking about before, how it doesn't matter what people tell you, you already know, it's like you saw the evidence for something and no one can tell you otherwise. And Panyo Basa understands that stuff really well. He opened his comment on my last video. He started off quoting the stuff from about the cloud of unknowing, relating how I was relating it to this. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Hopefully, I was able to elaborate on this further, and once again, also, thanks to Panyo Basa for responding. That really means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. And I suppose that concludes tonight's video. Peace out, everybody. Bye.